Elderberry has so much to offer. It's one of those very mystical plants. It has a lot of mythology and folklore behind it.
Hello and welcome to the Herbs with Rosalee podcast, a show exploring how herbs heal as medicine, as food, and through nature connection. I'm your host, Rosalee de la Forêt. I created this YouTube channel to share trusted herbal wisdom so that you can get the best results when relying on herbs for your health. I love offering up practical knowledge to help you dive deeper into the world of medicinal plants and seasonal living. Each episode of the Herbs with Rosalee podcast is shared on YouTube as well as your favorite podcast app. Transcripts and recipes for each episode can be found at herbswithrosaleepodcast.com or through the link in the video description. Also in the video description, you'll find other helpful resources. For example, to get my best herbal tips, as well as fun bonuses, be sure to sign up for my weekly herbal newsletter. Okay, grab your cup of tea and let's dive in. Holly is a prolific writer who's had many herbal endeavors over the years, from running her own apothecary to having an herbal school. I've been emailing with Holly for years, and it was great to finally get the chance to meet her. For those of you who don't already know her, herbalist, entrepreneur, and author Holly Bellebuono has spent 30 years teaching plant medicine and business courses for natural and organic product makers. She directs the Bellebuono School of Herbal Medicine and the Cell Entrepreneur Network. Holly lectures globally at conferences, retreats, and universities. Her documentary book, Women Healers of the World: The Traditions, History, and Geography of Herbal Medicine, was named Book of the Year by the International Herb Association. Her 7 nonfiction books have been published in 3 languages. Her 8th book will be released spring of 2025, Once Upon a Place: Forests, Caverns, and Other Places of Transformation in Myth, Fairy Tale, and Film. Holly, I'm so excited to have you on the show.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here.
In many ways, I'm just kind of surprised. This is really our first time interacting, although we've been emailing each other for years. And of course, I'm very aware of who you are, all your fabulous books. So yeah.
And you contributed to one of the books, The Healing Kitchen, right?
Right.
Your recipes
Right.
are in here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, but even still, as much as we've interacted, via email and recipe exchange, this is our first time face to face, screen to screen. I don't know. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to hearing your herbal plant story and how the plants have called you to be on this path.
Yeah, so thrilled to be here. Thank you, and it's so good to see you. So I started. It's been like 30 years. 30 years ago, I started with as getting an undergrad in English and creative writing, and then I worked at a publishing house for a while, and then decided, I really want to study sustainable development, sustainable agriculture, and so I went to graduate school. And while I was in graduate school, I got a job to help pay my way on a landscaping crew. And so I was digging and hauling and shoveling and planting trees and shrubs in rich people's backyards, is what this landscaping crew did. But the director of the crew was this old hippie guy who was very into philosophy, and he didn't just run a landscaping crew. He taught all of us young people who were on his crew how to listen to the plants, where they wanted to be planted, how to tune in to the plants, that they were speaking to us, and that we could learn a lot from them, and that not only were they ornamentals for the landscaping, but they were edibles and they were medicinals. And I had never heard this before. And so I was fascinated. And I started learning about edibles, edible plants, and like chickweed, I think, was one of the first, and poke leaf was maybe the second. And then I started learning about how they could be medicinal. And I come from a very medical-oriented family. My mom was a registered nurse. My dad's a pharmacist. All of my cousins and aunts and uncles are somehow, physical therapists or nurses. And so I grew up with a very medical family that was into anatomy and physiology and chemistry and science. And so being able to have that as my foundation and then learn about medicinal plants was just fantastic. And I learned so much. I dove headfirst into learning everything I could about plants. I opened up a tiny little apothecary in Boone, North Carolina, where I was living, and it was called Sweet Cicely Herbs, and it was just fun. I just had fun. I experimented. I made things. I collected glass bottles. I just did everything that a young herbalist does, and it was wonderful. And then I moved to Martha's Vineyard with my young family, and the herbalist who had been here had just moved away. And so I kind of slid right into her spot in the community, in the farmer's market, in the business world. And I shut down my old apothecary in North Carolina. I opened up a new one here called Vineyard Herbs, and it just took off. And I started selling to a really global clientele, because if you're familiar with Martha's Vineyard, people come here from all over the world. And so I was making herbal products and selling everywhere, and learning and teaching and hosting herb walks and workshops. And then I started speaking at all these different conferences. And then publishers found me and asked me to start writing books. And so I did. So now I've got 7 nonfiction herbal books in 3
7.
languages, which is super exciting. And it's just been an incredible path. And then in 2011, I was like, I've been teaching for so long. I really need to make it official. And so I opened up my herb school. And I was a little bit nervous about it, actually. Back then, I was like, there are so many wonderful teachers out there. What do I have to contribute? And that's part of what I'm here to do now, is help women find that empowering voice within themselves and say, yeah, I've got a lot to contribute,
Mm.
whatever it is I'm teaching. And opened up my herb school, and it was fantastic. And I've met the most incredible people who have been students and teachers. And so it's a member of the American Herbalist Guild, school community. And I taught in person for ages. I hosted intensive retreats here on the vineyard, which was a lot of fun for people to come to the beach and learn about herbs at the same time. And now it's all online.
Mm.
Um, and I'm really enjoying all aspects of it, getting to play around with plants, getting to increase my knowledge about the science behind it. And because I come to it with a very practical approach. When I was really young, in my early 20s, I was spellbound and starry-eyed about plants, which was lovely. And now I've moved past that. I've shifted more into functional. What can I do with them? How is it? How do I interrelate with plants and the earth? How do they interrelate with me in a really practical, pragmatic kind of a way,
Mm.
to address problems and to find solutions? So that's really where I'm at now, and I'm really loving it.
Mm. Holly, in all these interviews that I've done, one thing that often is a similarity between all of us plant people is it just took like one slight nudge towards the plants, and it was like then our consciousness was like, yes, that's for me. Didn't, it wasn't like we were slung over the head with it. It's just kind of like somebody just opened our eyes a little bit, and there's just that instant curiosity of like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that this was
Yeah.
or medicinal. And then it just is like, then we just take off.
Mhm.
I like your explanation of like, being in your young 20s and being starry-eyed with plants. And I remember that feeling too. And like I wanted to do everything with all the plants. And it was so exciting. And I am so glad that I did that. Like, every single plant I came across, I'd want to work with it in some way. And
Mhm.
it's been interesting because lately I've been like, wow, I really gravitate now towards like certain plants. And like people ask me like, oh, well, can you do this with that? And I'm like, yeah, you could, but it's like
Exactly,
not really
yeah.
practical, or or there's another plant. So that's kind of just an interesting reflection of like the different things. But I think that's so important at the beginning of the herbal stage to have that open-minded curiosity and starry-eyedness, so you can go down all these paths and then find out which one is for you.
Yeah, and play and connect and make mistakes and taste something that didn't turn out right and
Right.
try it again later and say, "Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
that's better this way." And, yeah, it's great to be able to have that freedom to experiment and get your hands-on experience, rather than just book learning,
Mhm.
or, which is wonderful and it's a great supplement, but to be able to harvest and plant and grow things yourself and then snip them off and make things with them. So one of my books was Women Healers of the World. It's a documentary book about women from all over who have something to do with plants. One of the women I interviewed was Doña Enriqueta Contreras, a midwife from Oaxaca. And she was telling me about her experience with the Mexican government, who was trying to shut down her midwifery practice because she didn't have a degree or a certificate. But she had been doing it her whole life. She had delivered like 2,000 babies
Wow.
and knew exactly what she was doing, but because she didn't have a degree, they wanted to put a stop to that. And so it's that same, if you need that empirical knowledge, that hands-on knowledge, no matter how you get it, in addition to the schooling or the reading or the going to the conferences, it all meshes together to form a really strong body of experience that will inform all of your decisions, and all of it is valid.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Holly. So you've chosen one of my very favorite plants, and this is a plant that I definitely work with all the time. In fact, I just made a wonderful iced tea with elderberries the other day. I'm just excited to hear what you want to share about elderberry.
Okay, there's so much to share.
Yeah.
So I can just share, what I'm familiar with, which is Sambucus nigra or Sambucus canadensis is elderberry. I've really gotten to know elderberry well since living here on the island of Martha's Vineyard. So we're just south of Cape Cod. It's very sandy. It's New England, so we get all four seasons, very clearly. And elderberry thrives here. It's everywhere. It likes to keep its feet wet. So I find it in the bogs and in the really wet meadows. I find it going to the beaches on the trails out through the dunes. It really likes the sandy wet of just next to the beach. It's next to the ponds and the lakes. It really wants to be where its feet are wet and its head is in the sun. Um, and I've gone out harvesting elderberry with a friend of mine who we would bring a pickup truck and drive the truck backwards as close as we could get to this little boggy meadow without the truck sinking in the water, and put a ladder in the back of the pickup truck and try to get as high up as we could
Uh-huh.
to get to the flowers or the berries. Um, and it's just wonderful to harvest it, and it usually does involve ladders because it can get pretty tall. So elderberry has so much to offer. It's one of those very mystical plants. It has a lot of mythology and folklore behind it. In Europe, it's historically been either a witch's herb, that a witch because she plants elderberry by her door, or an herb to keep witches away. You better plant an elderberry by your door so that witches don't come in. So there's a lot of contradictory folklore about elder. Um, one of the one of the stories that I've heard over and over about elder, especially from Europe, is the Huldemutter, the mother elder who lives inside the tree, and that you have to ask her permission to use her first before taking her berries or her flowers or her leaves or her twigs. And so that's the Huldemutter. And the elder mother is this pervasive giver of permission for this lovely tree. Um, it's a wonderfully medicinal plant. Um, so the edible parts are the flowers and the berries. The leaves are not edible, but they are medicinal, and I'll get to those in a minute. But the flowers and the berries are anticatarrhal, antimicrobial, diaphoretic, soothing. A lot of people, including myself, really love the flowers because they're so gentle and they're so soothing that they're a wonderful remedy for babies and young children who have fevers. You want to reduce their fever, you give them a tea of elderflower, or who have sinus congestion. It's an upper respiratory decongestant. Again, really safe, really mild, very soothing. Um, the berries in particular are wonderful for colds and flu, pair really well with calendula and peppermint and echinacea, um, sage, all these plants that you would take when you have the flu to dry up the mucus or to, herbs that are expectorant for coughs. You'll find it in a lot of cough syrups, antitussive. Um, I find that the flowers, being as soothing and cooling as they are really nice for anger as an emotional remedy for especially teenagers who are just being sassy and snotty and they're just mad about everything. Juliet de Berkeley-Levy, in one of her books, talks about oats being good for anger. And I think there are other herbs as well, like elderflower, roses, really nice for soothing and calming and alleviating that fire that can get really nasty inside. For adults too, we all go through periods where we just feel yucky and we're mad at the world or for whatever reason. And elderflower is one of those that, as a tea, especially combined with roses, is just such a lovely remedy that helps you center and get back to that cool, steady place of, yes, I can handle this. Topically, the flowers are really lovely. They make a wonderful lotion. They're really nice with calendula or violet flowers, St. John's wort flowers. They don't bloom at the same times really as chicory flowers, but if you have one or the other dried and the other one's blooming, they make a nice combination. So as a lotion or a cream or a rinse, just a water rinse on the skin. So again, there's the anger thing for boils and rashes on the skin, really angry skin, whether it's poison ivy or just some sort of rash or irritation. Elderflower makes a lovely cooling rinse for that sort of problem. The leaves, I think, are an underutilized, understood, misunderstood part of the elderberry tree. The leaves are fantastically medicinal, not edible, but medicinal topically. And when I ran my apothecary, Vineyard Herbs, one of my best-selling products was a first aid ointment that was a hodgepodge of a whole lot of plants, pretty much whatever I could get my hands on. Red clover, comfrey, yarrow, sage, elder leaf was a big part of it. And I've discovered over the years that when you steep elder leaf in oil, I use olive oil primarily, but any kind of oil, it gets this really deep, dark, rich green color. It's just a powerful green color. And it's incredibly healing. I had so much success with this first aid ointment. I had people come up to me and show me their hands. This one woman came up and said, at my 4th of July party last summer, I got burned on a firecracker and the whole palm of my hand was destroyed. And the only thing I used was your first aid ointment. And she showed me her hand and there was nothing, not even a scar, and it's that kind of story that is really, it really confirms or affirms, just how powerful these plants can be and how healing they can be. And elder leaf, I attribute part of the success to that first aid remedy is elder leaf.
I'm curious with the elder leaf. Do you prefer to use it fresh or dried or either?
I use it with fresh leaf. You can use it with dried, but I found it's really effective fresh, and then you steep it in the oil, and then you've got the oil that you could make salves with it for the rest of the year. If the oil, if it doesn't go bad, then you've got a ready remedy to strain and then add to your beeswax at any time.
Cool. I've never done that with elder leaf. I'm excited to try it.
It's a beautiful oil and color, and it's a really strong first aid remedy. So you mix it with mint and yarrow in particular, sage, comfrey, all of your typical first aid plants. But yeah, it's one that a lot of people haven't tried, so definitely give it a try. I've found it to be fantastic.
Lovely.
So elderberry twigs, another part of the folklore is that they've been, if you take out the pith, they're usually very slim, skinny little twigs, but they can be hollowed out, and you end up with a little pipe. And people have made musical instruments out of them for centuries. And I've tried it and never was able to make it work. I would just end up blowing through a straw, basically.
Mhm.
But but to be able to make music from plants, talk about a healing remedy.
Mm,
It's lovely to be able to think about the elder tree as part of our song.
mm, that's lovely. I have seen, containers made out of elder, with
Mhm.
them being stopped on the one end and then hollowed out. They're really beautiful, but yeah, I have not actually I've only heard of the flute, never seen it in real life.
Yeah, yeah. I tried it, did not work.
I wonder if it just takes some advanced, instrument skills.
I'm sure. Yeah. Yeah, so elder is it's one of those plants that is multi-purpose. It's generally very safe. Some people, when they eat the raw berries, will get stomach aches. The seeds inside are not really meant to be eaten. It's primarily meant to be cooked. So if you intend to eat the berries, you want to cook them and make your elderberry pie or your cobbler or whatever.
Mm,
Excuse me, then it's delicious. And the same thing with elder flowers. People make fritters with the flower heads. The whole umbel you put into a little batch of dough or batter, and give it a little deep fry, and you've got this. You can just barely taste the elder, but it's really good batter. But yeah, lots of ways to get creative. And then I've made various batches of wines. I've made dandelion wine and plum wine, which is called prunelle, which is delicious. And oh my gosh, all sorts of different wines and different berries. And elderberry was one of them, and elderflower. And of course, the St. Germain's uh, elderflower liqueur is
mhm,
very popular and delicious and makes a wonderful spritzer with ginger ale. So lots of fun ways to use elder medicinally and edibly, and topically as a remedy. So I
mm,
think it's a fantastic plant to get to know. I have to be honest, I've never used the red elderberries out west.
mhm.
Um, I've never really had the opportunity, so I don't know anything about them, but the black elderberries on the East Coast are fantastic.
Hmm. I remember coming out to International Herb Symposium, it's like that would be like in June, I guess, and they would just all the flowers would be in bloom, and it'd just be, we'd be driving around, and it was like almost painful to drive past so many and not be able to like just, because we're like carpooling and stuff, trying to get to the conference. And yeah, I remember
Mhm.
there were just being so many of them. It was amazing.
Yeah, they love the East Coast, everywhere, and they love, like I said, to be wet. So if you're near a pond or a stream, um, it's a really good chance that you'll have elders growing nearby.
Mm.
They're very easy to transplant. If you see little babies growing next to the established tree, you can take the little baby plants and transplant them. They're very hardy.
That's a very good tip. You shared what looks to be a very enticing recipe with us, bright vinegar for colds. It looks spicy, it looks elderberry, it looks delicious. Would you like to share a little bit about the recipe?
Yeah, so this comes from my book, The Healing Kitchen, that you were also part of, and it's bright vinegar for colds. And when my kids were young, they loved vinegar. They would just drink vinegar straight, which
Mm,
was a little odd, but they loved it. And they were very healthy kids. They rarely got sick, but when they did, they loved vinegar remedies. And so any herb that I could steep in vinegar, especially that was immunomodulating or antibacterial or antitussive, they couldn't get enough of it. So I made a lot of vinegar remedies. And this one, bright vinegar for colds, um, it's very intense. It's very aromatic. It can be a bit spicy. I think vinegar is in general, but this one in particular. And it's the kind of thing, all of these recipes are, um, whatever you have on hand is what you need to put in it. Don't fret if you don't have a particular ingredient, use what you've got, and experiment. That's the name of the game. So this one it includes dried elderberries, Dried, I find to be a lot more palatable than fresh when you're making a remedy that you take internally. It's the same principle as either cook it or you dry it, right? So this one calls for the dried elderberries, thyme leaves. Thyme is just like oregano. It's this wonderful, healing, pungent, almost spicy Mediterranean herb that is very hardy. You know, a lot of people put thyme in their walkways. You can walk right over it. It springs right back. It smells incredible. All the different varieties of thyme, and it's one of those herbs that I really rely on for colds and flu, um, because it's incredibly potent as a winter remedy.
Mm.
And I would
One
say
of my
you could,
favorites. I mean, I could say that
yeah,
about every herb, but there's something about thyme. Like for me in the wintertime, there's no soup without thyme.
right,
Yeah. It's
yeah.
lovely.
Um, Cleavers. So this recipe includes cleavers. Um, in all of the different places where I've lived, in the mountains of North Carolina, here on the coast in Massachusetts, you find cleavers. So they're not everywhere, but they are in a lot of different places, and they're called lady's bedstraw. It's Gallium aperine is the Latin binomial, and lady's bedstraw is because they grow in these mats of spindly little stalks that have little leaves, and they're not prickles, but they're little suction cups almost that make them stick to each other in these mats, and then they stick to you in your clothes. So they would form really lovely mats that people would stuff their mattresses with. So ladies' bed straw. And the reason that there are two reasons that cleavers are really useful is they're edible. They make a really nice vegetable. You can steam them. I've tried it many times. It's not what you would call delicious. It's actually a bit stringy and fibrous, but if you are foraging your food or if you're in need of wild sustenance, cleavers has got your back. They're also a lymphatic remedy. So, anytime you want to think about clearing or good drainage for your body, your immune system, your lymph system, you think about cleavers. So, that's in this vinegar. Onion and garlic, we think about them for sautés, but they're actually very potent medicines. And horseradish root is the last ingredient in this vinegar. And horseradish is wonderful for opening up the upper region of your head, your sinuses. It's a great anti-congestion herb. So all of these foods, herbs, berries, leaves, they combine to create this really potent remedy that you can take by the dropper. You can put it in a little tincture bottle and take it by the dropper, or my kids would just take it by the teaspoon or swig it straight from the bottle. And you want to use apple cider vinegar. So you don't want to use white vinegar. That's a cleaning substance, really. You want to use apple cider vinegar. Um, you can you don't want to use balsamic. You want to use apple cider vinegar. So that's really the key to making it delicious, and that's a good extraction menstruum for these plants. It really pulls out what you need. You can add vodka, basic grain alcohol to it, but I've never felt the need. I think that the vinegar is just potent enough that it's pulling out what you need. It's pulling out some minerals, and then it's preserving naturally so that your remedy lasts a long time.
Mm.
So that's this recipe, and I hope people enjoy it. It could be a salad dressing if you want, all right?
Mm.
You could just use
That would
it
be
as salad
delicious.
dressing. You can also add honey to it. Once you strain it, you can add honey, and then you've got an oxymel, which is this sweet tart um, remedy that is really nice for especially kids who don't like vinegar so much. They want it sweet.
Mhm.
So an oxymel is a sweet and sour remedy. It could be sugar and lemon juice, or it could be honey and vinegar, but it's got that tangy sweet combo that makes it really delicious. And it brings with it all the herbs that you've steeped in it. So,
Mm.
so it's a very versatile remedy. Salad dressing, go on to be an oxymel, or just keep it as it is and have it be a cold and flu remedy for when you're sick.
Mm. Yeah, and I love you mentioned in the recipe, make this up ahead of time, have it for you, all winter long for
Mhm.
um, an instance of cold and flu, which, as you said, if it never comes to pass, then you've got salad dressing, so nothing goes
Right.
to waste.
Right.
And
And as
as a
far as
reminder for oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just gonna say, as far as shelf life, you could expect it to last a good year and a half, maybe 2 years. It's a long-term shelf-stable type of remedy.
Wonderful. As a reminder to listeners, if you want to download your beautifully illustrated recipe card with all the ingredients, all the instructions, all of Holly's helpful tips, you can do that at herbswithrosaliepodcast.com or check out the show notes. Well, thank you so much for sharing about elderberry, elderflowers, elder leaf, and this recipe. Is there anything else you'd like to share about elderberry before we move on?
Not specifically. There's a lot, about its, immune properties, about its antitussive properties, but it gets pretty scientific, and I really like to teach people just connect with the plants,
Mm,
get to learn, experiment with them on your own, and then when you find something that really resonates with you about that plant or about an issue that you're experiencing personally, then dive deeper and learn more.
mhm.
Yeah.
That's such a great tip. I find that's how we actually retain things. If it's just trying to memorize it, it can go in one ear and not the other. But when we have a need for it, it sticks.
Mhm. I also find, in my herb school when I'm teaching, I find that, teaching by categories is really helpful. So herbal actions like anti-catarrhal, things that dry up mucus in the sinuses, that's an action, and its own category, and there are many herbs that fit in that category. Or aromatic, herbs that have essential oils and they smell really amazing. They fit in that category of aromatic and they have certain qualities. And once you learn that category or that action, it makes it a lot easier to remember and then to formulate and put blends together and figure out what you need for a particular condition. Say a cough, you need an expectorant, you might need an anti-catarrhal, you might need an immune modulator. Each of those categories, you say, okay, those are the categories I need. Now, what herbs fit underneath those categories?
Mm,
And there could be 10 that you come up with. And if you look across your lists, you might see that there are maybe peppermint shows up in every single list. And you're like, aha, that's a key
mhm,
herb for me at this time for this issue. And so that is one that I'm definitely going to focus on. And maybe there are three, maybe elderflower is one that comes up in all three of your lists. And so I find that that's a really good way to think about, well, to learn about herbs because it can be really overwhelming. We have
mhm,
so many incredible plants that are healing remedies. And I think it can be a little bit daunting if you're new to herbs in particular. Where do you start? How do
mhm,
you know if you're doing it right? What if this isn't the safest? What if I should try something more gentle? For beginners especially, I think it's really helpful to start with categories
mm,
and get familiar with those herbal action categories and learn a few herbs in each of those categories. And then you have a much better sense of, okay, I'm going to blend these together, or these are the ones I need. These have this particular action or quality in the body. And so that's what I'm going to look for. I think that's a really nice way it's a really helpful, streamlined kind of a way to start your learning process.
And like you said, make sense of all of the
Mhm.
amazing plants that we have access to. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Holly, I'd love to hear about. I know you have an exciting project coming up next year, and I'd love to hear about it.
Thank you. I'd love to share it. I'm co-hosting Herbal Tuscany 2025 in Italy, and it's going to be a fantastic trip. I've opened spots, and I'm accepting registrations for people who would like to join me. It's being curated by Richard Liebman, who is a former executive director of the United Plant Savers, and his wife, Natalie Young, who is a massage specialist and a yoga instructor. So myself and my partner, David, who is he's worked with disability and housing all his life. The four of us are going to co-host this trip to Tuscany. And I feel really blessed to be able to do this because Richard and Natalie have been organizing similar trips for herbalists for years.
Hmm.
And so this one is going to focus on um, botanical gardens, ancient herb gardens. We're going to visit an essential oil farm
Wow.
and production facility. We're going to be in Florence and Assisi and Siena. We're going to do a wine tour or a vineyard tour and a wine tasting in Montepulciano.
Mm.
Um, One thing that I'm really excited about is I'm going to have a new book coming out in March. So, right before this trip happens in May, my newest book will come out, which is called Once Upon a Place: Forests, Caverns, and Other Places of Transformation in Myth, Fairy Tale, and Film.
Wow.
And so, I don't know if you're familiar with Joseph Campbell's hero's journey.
Hmm.
His philosophy was that, we mature, we go through these challenges throughout our lives, all of us do, and it follows a particular process. So I'm looking at not the process so much, but the place. Where do you go? And there are 5 places: the cavern, the deep, the forest, the vessel, and the labyrinth. And so I'm going to infuse a little bit of all of that into our Italy trip.
Oh,
We're
wow.
gonna, yeah, we're gonna we're gonna tour through the Etruscan tunnels, the underground tunnels
Oh, wow.
under Montepulciano. We're gonna go to the grottos at the Boboli Palace. They've got grottos underneath where the water flowed, and I like to look at the symbolism of it and pull out those images that really speak to personal transformation and growth
Mm.
and fairy tale and global story. We all share these stories. So that's gonna flavor a little bit of our incredible Tuscan adventure.
Wow, Holly, that really sounds amazing. Um, yeah, just like a really incredible curated event and all the botanical gardens. Is this going to be specifically for herbalists or is it just kind of for anyone?
You know, it's for anyone. It's for foodies, it's for
Mhm.
gardeners, it's for authors and writers. I've talked to a lot of, writers of historical fiction that are, historians. It could be for anyone who is really interested in just exploring the sensory experience of Tuscany.
Oh, that's so lovely. I was in Tuscany this year. It was the first time I'd been back in 20 years, and it was so lovely to be there. It was very easy to travel. I did Italian lessons before like 3 months before I went, and it was enough to, like, get around, and I felt like the Italians that I spoke to were happy for to hear my limited Italian and were also just very kind about it, so that was kind of fun, too. And then, of course, the food. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
went to Italy, a number of years ago, maybe 8 years ago, but the southern part. I went to Rome and down to Pompeii, which was on my
Mhm.
bucket list for sure. So yeah, I'm really excited to be able to share this with other herb appreciators, foodies, earth lovers. I think it's gonna be a wonderful way to just connect with other people and, um, and explore places that I've never been, this part of Italy, even if people have been there, we're gonna look at it with a different lens and a different perspective,
Mm.
partly through the plants and partly through this idea of, personal change and how do you overcome obstacles? How do we all grow? What are the world's stories about how people do this and the imagery behind it?
That sounds really lovely. And for anyone who's interested, we'll put links all over the show notes so that you can find more information about this. Do you
And
have a
lots of
recommended time to
pasta
sign up by?
by this New Year's.
Okay.
By the holiday season and New Year's would be,
Yeah.
um, when we're trying to have the full roster ready.
Yeah. All
Yeah.
right. Well, that's going to be an amazing trip. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then did you want to also mention your school? I know you have a new course online.
Yeah, so I've been running my herbal school since 2011, and, um, with COVID, I stopped in-person teaching, and, actually went to go work in a bunch of nonprofits, well, a couple of nonprofits, and became a nonprofit executive and started, guiding these nonprofits through COVID with strategy and fundraising and financial planning. And so that was like the executive Holly. And then the herbal Holly came back um, and took all of the curriculum and got it online. So it's a really, I think it's a well-structured course. It's very, again, pragmatic and practical. I cover all the body systems. I cover formulary. What we were just talking about, herbal actions, that's a big part of it. How to think about organizing plant knowledge so that you can make the most effective remedies and blends. Um, I also incorporate into the course some entrepreneurial classes. I have a class called Sell Natural and a class called Sell Organic and a Sell Startup. So this is all part of my business, Sell, SELLE. Um, and it's really to help herbalists and crafters and people in the natural and organic product industries um, be compliant, FDA compliant, to know what it means to meet certified organic standards. What are these other commitments and certifications you can get as a business owner? Fair trade, fair hiring, women owned, um, B Corp. What does all this mean? What are the UN Sustainable Development Goals? How can your business really be a positive impact business? What are your core values and your purpose as a business owner? So really these entrepreneurial skills, what are pricing strategies? How do you figure out how you're going to price your products? How do you warehouse? What are your good manufacturing practices? Especially if you have interns or apprentices helping you, how do you train them in hygiene and cleanliness and receiving shipments of herbs? All of these things go into running an herbal business or an apothecary or skincare or cosmetics, whatever people are doing. And so these courses are part of the bigger, it's a 96-hour certificate course called Herbal Medicine Foundations.
Mhm. Well, that's really wonderful. That information you're talking about with the GMPs and all of, how to run an apothecary, that information can be hard to come by. It's not everywhere you look. So that's a really important offering. Thank you.
It is, and I've found that a big part of why women in particular don't pursue their dreams of running a business or opening a shop is that they feel intimidated or they can't find the right information or they find contradictory information.
Mhm.
And so really trying to tie all this together with, you learn about herbs. It's not particularly a clinical path that I teach. It's an entrepreneurial journey for self-empowerment, self-agency, and growing as a person, really.
Yeah, I'm beginning to see that theme with you. Well, Holly, before you go, I'd love to ask you a last question. And that question is, what do you wish you had known about herbs before you first started working with them?
I wish that I had been more aware, more self-aware about um, making a livelihood for myself,
Hmm.
having a job, um, because I was so starry-eyed, like I mentioned, when I was in my early 20s. I just wanted to run out and play in the forest all day.
I
And,
get
um, you don't really get paid for that. So I really wish that I had more of a sense of building a business or supporting myself, generating revenue, at the same time loving and enjoying herbal medicine and plants. That blending those two skills together would have been really helpful. It took me a long time to make it a livelihood and to make it something that I could do full time. And that would have been helpful for me. So that's part of the reason that I do so much entrepreneurial work, is to help other, especially young women, develop that sense of you know um, livelihood, working for yourself, being independent, or working for someone else, just, developing those skills so that you have the financial capacity to enjoy the plants and learn about herbal healing.
Well, it's very well said, and I resonate with that a lot as well. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Holly, for taking the time to be with us, for sharing so much about the elder shrub, and for all your insights too about transformation and livelihood and all of it. I know there's going to be a lot of people out there. This was exactly what they needed to hear.
Well, thank you, Rosalee. I really appreciate being here.
Thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to head over to the show notes at herbswithrosaleepodcast.com to download your beautifully illustrated recipe card and to get a transcript of this show. There, you'll also be able to sign up for my weekly newsletter, which is the best way to stay in touch with me. You can also find more from Holly at hollybellebuono.com. If you'd like more herbal episodes to come your way, then one of the best ways to support this podcast is by subscribing on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. I deeply believe that this world needs more herbalists and plant-centered folks, and I'm so glad that you're here as part of this herbal community. Also, a big round of thanks to the people all over the world who make this podcast happen week to week. Nicole Paul is the project manager who oversees the whole operation, from guest outreach to writing show notes to actually uploading each episode and so many other things I don't even know. She really holds this whole thing together. Francesca is our fabulous video and audio editor. She not only makes listening more pleasant, she also adds beauty to the YouTube videos with plant images and video overlays. Tatiana Rusakova is the botanical illustrator who creates gorgeous plant and recipe illustrations for us. I love them. I know that you do too. Christy edits the recipe cards, and then Jenny creates them as well as the thumbnail images for YouTube. Alex is our tech support and social media manager, and Karen and Emily are our student services coordinators and community support. For those of you who like to read along, Jennifer is who creates the transcripts for us each week. Xavier, my handsome French husband, is the cameraman and website IT guy. It takes an herbal village to make it all happen, including you. One of my favorite things about this podcast is hearing from you. I'm not kidding. Every time a podcast comes out, I'm checking out those comments. So I'd love to hear from you all about elderberry and any thoughts you've had about this interview. All right, you've lasted to the very end of the show, which means you get a gold star and this herbal tidbit. Well, I was fascinated about Holly's description of using the leaves as a topical first aid remedy, so I'm excited to try it out. I also ran across a study that happened in 2021, which showed that a topical preparation of Sambucus ebulus, which is a type of elder, worked as well, if not slightly better, than a topical application of hydrocortisone on hand eczema. That's really cool. Wouldn't it be amazing if doctors gave elder leaf salve as a first intervention for eczema? I mean, just think of all those avoided side effects.